Hey everyone, welcome to the Data Insights podcast where we feature data pros to talk about their data journeys and challenges they face in their roles, along with some practical insights to elevate your data game. Today we have Goutam Ravi, who is a data scientist at Amazon in Boston. Welcome, Goutam.
Hi.
Hey, cool. So, Gautam, can you share your journey to becoming a data scientist at Amazon? What sparked your interest in data science?
It has been a roller coaster ride for me, and especially at Amazon. Answering about that one is like solving a problem with the data has always been my passion. In some ways, like a problem solving. Some problems are you use a different mechanisms. Sometimes you solve with easy ways out. Sometimes it is challenging. So solving those puzzles has been my forte, you can say. So, and today, as everything is about data, and if you are not using the data to drive the business, I don't think so like you'll survive the business. So I think like that's the main thing. And coming back to the journey with Amazon is a company wherein like they talk about leadership principles, etc., but all those driven by data. And that's where it starts. And then Amazon is always about the applications. So there's a leadership principle about Amazon is like bias to action. That is, you fail, it's okay to fail, but you have to fail fast. That is, they open to exploration. And the same way at Amazon also, like I was a part of business intelligence engineer, then I moved to the data scientist as a journey there. And transitioning for that one, like Amazon is always okay, like if you are able to do that, if you're solving those problems, like they have their checks and everything. But if you do that, like that, you can always like switch. But again, it's like the application is what drives. I think be it any company, like not just Amazon, right? Like a data scientist has to be application driven. People will know the data. It's not about the writing the SQL or the Python or anything like that, or just knowing the algorithm. So like, okay, what does it do? I highly believe that application is what brings that for like a data scientist.
I see. I see. Thanks for that insight. So, how did you experience, as I know you were working as a pricing specialist before in the field of logistics as well. So, how did that shape your perspective on data analysis and problem solving?
I think even there are different problems. You're just solving a different problems. That's about it. Everywhere there is a problem. Every business has a problem. Every business has a problem statement. Else they won't be working. If all the problems are solved, anybody will not have a job, right? Like there's always going to be a new problem, new phases. It is just a different problems, I believe, and that's where changing into different domains will help you to understand the different aspects. And to be honest, it's always been useful. For example, working in the logistics space, in fact, I was a software developer first, then I moved to a supply chain. I've transitioned even in the technical aspect of it. I've been on the different spectrums. But it has the problems you face in one domain, most likely you will face in the other domain as well. For example, routing problems in the logistics, right? Like you have a routing problems, you have to speed like a smallest drives in the logistics. Whereas you have operational problems in pricing industries, where like, okay, what is the optimal price? How do I do that, etc. So there's going to be always some overlap of the understanding. You just some algorithms to use or like experience. Okay, you have to use like a Bayesian. This is going to help for to solve this problem. You just have to manipulate your data sets accordingly so that you can solve a problem, similar problems. It's just a different industry you're solving the problem for, but you're always going to use your fundamentals. The fundamentals are going to be the same. And most likely what I've experienced is you carry forward that. For example, in my previous team, I was working on anomaly detection, wherein in the fuel pricing, I worked on anomaly detection for a different use case. Okay. The same one, the same algorithm, same mechanism helped me in a fraud detection for Amazon.
Okay.
Okay. It's
Interesting.
just a different aspect of it. For example, in the fuel pricing, what I was trying to do is like if the fuel for every gas station is if at oftentimes happens is like there is a sales surcharge or like a dip. So either up or down. So that way that indicator can help a business analyst to like see what's happening so that they can adjust the pricing to it. Okay, so that was one challenge, right? So here we can just apply an anomaly detection wherein like, okay, you take the time series of it, you understand the historical pattern, and then like if it is exceeding beyond a threshold, I've used IQR there, and like you can just use the threshold changes, and then that will help you like, okay, this is an anomaly. So that alert system is much helpful for an analyst. Okay, so that one identification, right? The same mechanism in the fraud one. Okay, so the same way you can apply with just a different data set, you use that as a one of the features there, anomaly detection, and then feed to the detection model, fraud detection, and then you become another fraud detection model. Now the business use cases are completely different, but the underlying mechanism or the use of that one is the same.
Hmm.
So that carry
Interesting.
forward
Yeah.
always helps. But I would say definitely from my experience, like I would always encourage even my mentees at my team. I always encourage them is like, okay, always try different businesses, because that gives a different perspective and out of box thinking. And oftentimes if people are get stuck in a one domain itself, their vision is limited.
Hmm.
They cannot think out of the box. But when they have traversed these different industries, they get a different perspectives. They get to see the different challenges. So that helps.
That's a really interesting insight, and thanks for sharing that. So, what kind of tools and technologies do you rely mostly in your roles, or in your previous roles?
So I've used multiple one. I've used visualizations as a one part, as like solving a one problem statement. I've used auto MLs in a different use case. I've used AI. Currently, I'm working extensively on LLMs and agents pieces, and even like some part of it, like I'm using the computer visions as well. So I think the tools, these are all tools, I believe, and every problem has a different tools to use. So some problems they just maybe like just a ETL tool might be helpful, like just like okay, simple problems. For example, um, but, I mean, I highly believe is like the extent of work. There's a phrase: a guy with a hammer always seeks for the nail. Okay, so like it should not be that one. Like if you have extensive tools like okay, ML, and every problem cannot be solved with ML. I highly believe that. Or just AI or LLMs. So every problem has a different tools to use. For that one, I would highly recommend like, okay, always try. And like, as long as your solution is simple, business stakeholders always love it. The simplest solution is the best solution. So, for example, let's say they just want to alert, or let's say if a sales, there might be like a sales representative or something like that, and they just want to alert system wherein, okay, I have this target. If I reach this target, I want to alert. So simple ETL can be helpful for them. You don't have to apply like anomaly detection for that, like, okay, this one, because they already have a threshold there. But however, not saying like to restrict on that one, there can be instances wherein like if it is a time series or something like that, where the complex analysis you want to do, of course, like smaller tools will not help. So in that case, you'll have to go with like a Python. I've used R as well in some places, but that again, the infrastructure was allowing it only like R1, so that's why we had to use. So there always have to like a hopping of the technologies, I would say.
I see. Okay, interesting. So, like talking about Amazon, how do you approach building models for like large scale systems? I believe you mentioned LLMs, right? Any advice on balancing scalability and accuracy for these tools?
So there's always has to be the both go in parallel, right? Like the balance, as you mentioned, like they always have to be like accuracy is always the utmost important, as well as the scale also. So I think one has to think about it like a user first, like how many users it is going to help. Some problem statements may be helpful for like very tailored towards a few individuals, but like let's say a team. Okay, if it is just catering to the team of that team, maybe the scalability is not that problematic for them. Then it becomes the accuracy, so that it's helpful for them. Okay. So, or let's say there is a problem statement which is going to help for a lot of other people, then accuracy can be a little bit stopped. Or again, like when I say it has to be taken with a pinch of salt there, because it also depends on problem statement. Let's say let's say fraud detection, right? Like that's a one example, right? The false positives. It's okay to have a false positives in, for example, in the detection of like a fraud mails. Okay, for example, it's okay to have some false positives. That's fine. But the false positives, that accuracy plays a very crucial role in case of like a healthcare. A false positive can lead to a lot of problems. In fact, it's like a false negatives as well, right? That's a much more critical for them for in the healthcare. That may not be in the email one. It's okay, the false positive. Some accuracy can be lower there, like the scalability becomes much important. But in case of the healthcare, it's the accuracy is more important, not the scale. So I think it depends on the business problem statement also you're solving. That plays a huge role, and the one has to understand that first, then they can think about the accuracy is important or like a scalability in that way. Of course, any problem statement, it's better to have the scalability, but I would not say like start with that. Okay, first start with the prototype, smaller use cases, etc. Try with that, see the user interactions, see the user helpful or not, and the stakeholders, right? Like any problem statement, one needs to understand is like how it is going to help for the business stakeholders. Oftentimes what happens is, I always see this, one of the challenges is like the scientists especially, it happens, right? They're so happy seeing like, okay, they have used algorithms, they have used like, okay, they see the results and everything, but it is not helpful for the business stakeholders at all. Okay, so one particular example I can say is, I cannot quote all the details. So we were building this one model wherein like, okay, this is generative AI, like it is doing very well job on the retrieval pieces, etc., etc. Okay, so we used a hybrid mechanism, everything like, oh, good, etc. So in our UI testing is like, okay, it's doing very well. But when it went to the business users, all they wanted was the reference names. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what the file name? Like, I don't want to like what's the content in that one. I just want the file name and the page number so that I can go to that one and then reference it. For them, that was useful, and that's like a simplest of all. You don't need to generate anything on that. But yeah, that's the thing, right? Like the you build a prototype, reach to the business stakeholders, understand that, and just change the direction. In that one, the scalability is not that important. You don't have to like build a huge kick-ass model there. It's like you just have to like, okay, they have a search queries, they just want the reference of the files and the page numbers so that it's easy for them. Even that one is solving their problems. Basically what's happening is, they have to browse through this PDF, like tens and hundreds of PDFs, and find that particular section of data. They spend 30 minutes to like 40 minutes doing that. Okay, but
Mm-hmm.
this tool, just giving that references, it saves that like 30 minutes for them, and then they can directly jump to that file and get that reference out of it. Now that action items we cannot decide for them. That's the domain expertise, and they know what to do. So that's the scalability. And then it's like we did not have to scale on that one. It's like small prototype, just help them is like good enough, small as that.
I see. Okay, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So, can you also share some example of a project that you have worked on that had like a significant impact on operations or decision making?
Yeah, sure. There is a one project which I worked on wherein the identification of, so in the Amazon warehouses, right? You always have like this design models. They have a lot of problems like, okay, when with the high scale, with the high speed at what Amazon works at, they always have this problem of like, okay, where the problem is. If there is like some jams, if there is like a workers, which these are like, there's a lot of these equipments are available, and these equipments are always with like these number names, and remembering that numbers, where that exact location, exact thing, like it's very hard, challenging for them, right? But at the side thing is, there is like a design document, these CAD documents, etc., right? So these CAD documents always have the image and then the name of it. So identifying where the problem is and mapping that on an image, that was one of the challenging project. We used a computer vision for that one. Basically like identifying like OCR technologies, wherein like, okay, scan the image and then identify these equipments where they're exact located, and get the coordinates of that one on that image file, so that from the live data we can correlate that and then showcase in the visualization that like where is a heat map kind of thing, so that they know which location they go to, which like they have to travel north or south, because these design documents will have that indication, right, where exactly it is. So that was a one which is, I think, like very helpful for the operations. It's still in the progress right now, but that was a very good wherein like they can quickly solve that. Else what they have to do is, right now they have to go through the document, they have to search through like operations, like, okay, where that device is, which location they have to go through, so that becomes more challenging for them. And then for people in the warehouse, the operations, right, reading through this like this ID, what's happening, etc., is very tedious. They're always like, they're already tired, they're already like, they have a lot of other things, there's the safety concerns and all those things. They have to consider all those aspects, and then as ease we make it, that's easier for them. So that's why these kind of projects will help them operations definitely. And that's the one wherein mapping, that was one of the challenging pieces, like just identifying, because these design documents, they have like a text overlapping there, and there is like a different equipment. So identifying that one, classification, detection of, first was the challenge of the detection and then classification of it, and then mapping on like just an image file, a PDF file, right? You are just mapping on that PDF file and then creating a heat map on it. So that was a challenging one. We kind of solved that one. Yeah, that was very helpful for the operations.
Interesting. Great. So, talking about data and documentation, and I believe you mentioned something about the management piece as well. Talking about Datawise, right, the platform that we are trying to build. Based on your experience, how do you see a platform like Datawise fitting into the data management and governance space?
I think definitely it's going to be very helpful. And I do see like the industry is trending towards that. That's one of the challenge that's not been explored yet, or like or not explored as like they're exploring, let me not say that, but not been solved, or like they don't have that accuracy. For example, right now the generative AI, they can generate, they are very good with unstructured data. They can like process it, they can understand the semantic meaning of it, and we can do like with the hybrid mechanisms. There's a lot of already well advanced tools or features available, but all these lack in the structured piece. Like structured data, managing that one has been a problematic, even for the generative AI, even for the agents one, right? And that's where I think like this Datawise is going to be helpful, wherein this application can understand the underlying data and then give the insights to the business stakeholders. So the time is at the utmost for the business stakeholders, right? So anyway you're reducing the time, it's helpful. Be
Got
it,
it.
for example, I mentioned is like, okay, for this jam one, like OCR, right? It's like we use that one, and what it's doing is it is reducing the time to solve that problem, like where the jam is, identification that one, like okay, and they can go and detect that and solve that. It might be just a simple problem, like some equipments are like tied up, it's a clogged one, and like just solving that one. This the action they need to take might be simpler one, but identification and then getting to that one is a challenging piece, right? In the same way here as well, for the business stakeholders, understanding what actionable insight they need to take, they can take the action later, but getting to what needs to be done is very critical for the business. And this is where probably the using the structured data and getting the insights out of it will be helpful. I think like that's where the bridging happens. And to be honest, I have not seen any tools as of now which are available, which are going to doing a good job. Even in like a large companies, they're not that good at the structured data, and that's where the scratching the surface of this one. And like that's where probably like industry is also heading towards. So that's where I think like it will be very helpful.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback and insight. So, if you're evaluating Datawise, what would you look for to determine its value to your team?
I think definitely the complex questions. I think
Hmm.
that's where I would focus on. Like I would seek out of it is right now a lot of like we go to like YouTube videos and all the things. Like there's already some algorithms available, and then they can just ask you like, okay, what's the sales of? Let's say you are dealing with the sales. Okay, if the question is what is the sales for 2020? I don't think so. That's helpful anymore. Where you can do even the smallest one. There are like already systems available, there's visualizations, there's a lot of advanced tools available to solve that problem. You don't need a AI to help you answer that one. However, if the problem is like what changed in the sales from 20 and 2021, a gold mine question for the business. That's where I would focus on. Like that's where the thing I would get out of it. If that's solving that one, it reduces a lot of time, because right now to answer that question, the first question even like what's the sales of 2022, a person, a technical folks can get you that answer in 5 minutes.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's not a big problem. But answer the second question, like what changed from 2020 in the sales, what happened with the sales for like 2020 and 2021. You have to find the trends out of it, you have to understand, you have to deep dive in the data and get that trends out of it. That takes more time. And then some technical folk like understanding that they may have their own bias towards it, they may not think out of it like out of the box, etc. That plays a lot of role. And getting that, probably it might take 1 hour for the business, a business analyst or somebody to get that answer for the business stakeholder. But whereas if the system can do it in like 5 minutes, that's the value add. Basically you're
Okay.
reducing the time there as well, right? So from 1 hour to like 5 minutes, so that they can
Hmm.
ask the next question. There's a follow-up question, there always have to be follow-up questions, right? So they can ask a follow-up question, and then their turnaround time is reduced. That's the
Interesting.
value. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you again. So, talk about people wanting to become a data scientist. What advice would you give to aspiring data scientists looking to break into logistics, e-commerce, or pricing, and any things that they can do to kind of upskill themselves, looking for top tech companies like Amazon?
Yeah, I think there are like few fundamental things one needs to know. Fundamental things, for example, Python. SQL.
Mm-hmm.
Or let me not like stick to like a one particular technology there. Of course, Python is a well-known one, and that's it's very helpful, etc. Like either Python or R. Okay, some scripting language, one query language, SQL, Spark, or something like that, like wherein they know that or like they can access the data. For beginners, like there's always that like they go to this Kaggle and then they understand like okay, on the YouTube videos they applied algorithms and then like okay, everything is like fancy, and then it's like okay, in half an hour you build a model. That does not work that way in the real scenarios. Oftentimes, scientists or any business, this kind of thing, right? They spend a lot of time in cleaning the data or like getting the data. That's the most time. Applying the algorithms is, if the data is massive, training the data might like take 1 hour, or like if the data is small, it's like in half an hour or something. So that's the easiest part, applying which algorithm and all the things. But modifying, translating your data so that your algorithm understands it, that's the challenging piece. That's the time you spend. In the YouTube videos or any courses, right, there's the data is always clean. They already know what to do. So it's a straightforward question. That does not happen. So for that one, one has to have the good fundamentals of one scripting language and one query language. So that's for sure. Sometimes visualization helps, but it's not necessary. I don't think so. Like visualization is the utmost one. It's helpful for like few roles, but not for all. Okay, so that's the one. Coming to the second one is problem solving. Okay, so like I said, like I'm a firm believer of like each problem has its own tools, and all these technologies are just the tools. Okay, not one is better than the other. So always seeking that the simplest solution is important. Okay, that problem solving, understanding like okay, I need to solve the problem the simplest as possible, because the simplest solution is the best solution. I believe. Okay, you don't have to have like okay, hey, for a business problem, let's say like they are just trying to reduce. For example, there's a risk detection. Okay, and then there's a fraudulent or something like that. Business can always have a guardrail. Let's say your model is detecting like 95%, so there is a lack of 5% accuracy, but you can achieve that 95% in 1 month or like a 1 week, versus to gain that 95 to 98% accuracy you need 6 months. So there's like 5 additional months. There's an incremental exponential increase in the time to achieve that, like only like 3% extra accuracy there, right? So I would always suggest that like go with a 95%, add a guardrail to the business so that they are checking from their end some kind of things in this risk, especially talking about this risk detection one. They can add that and then mitigate that risk for that 3%. Okay, because you're solving that in a 1 month. So that understanding is very important. Don't try to be always like take too much of time and solve that. Solve it quickly, experiment with it, run by with the business or the users, and then work on it. Don't try to have like an end-to-end product, like everything is built up and then you go to the system. No, but that attitude, I think that helps always in any industry. I think like not just like a one industry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are like a two major things I would say are like a problem solving and understanding that business one. And any industry you go, they're always solving for a business problem. So that understanding, you're not, unless and until it's a research field or something like that, wherein like they are trying to build up a new algorithm, etc. Unless and until it's that one, I would always say like problem solving attitude, and then some fundamentals. Yes, you always need to know like some scripting, some query languages. That's another approach. Those two things, if you have it, I think it should be good. One thing just to add on to that one is read articles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's another thing I've noticed is like not articles of like okay what they've solved. Like I think the Medium is a very good one wherein see how people have solved some business problems. Of course, there's not going to be live data and everything, but there are like different techniques they have used. Okay, article, and even the Reddit one. I think there's a lot of information these days, especially the challenge we face right now is with the AI one, right? There's not much of a documentation available. Everybody is solving a new problem. Everybody is experimenting, and oftentimes what happens is you try. Earlier used to happen is like you ask a question and then there's a Stack Overflow. Somebody's already tried it and then they have a solution for you. With the latest AI one, it is not that. You ask a question, your question is the one which is going to search for it, because nobody has solved it, nobody has answered to that one. So that's another thing, like reading the articles will definitely help.
Thanks again for that. So finally, what's the best piece of advice you've received in your career?
I think I was saying about that one, right? Like one thing, one of the leader mentioned to me was a guy with a hammer seeks for the nail. Like everything seems to be nailed for the guy with a hammer. Don't be that guy. Don't be that one. Like, okay, it's not always like your algorithms and everything. Like the fancy algorithms are not the solution. Sometimes a simple solution is the best solution. Like that's the best piece of advice for, at least from the career point of view. I think I've got that one. Like that changed a lot of my perspective, and that helped me to grow, understand the business, quickly give the results to them, and that helped them to act faster, and then eventually like help me grow as well, right? Like that's what helps. Like if you help grow the business, that will help indirectly help you to grow your career. That's how it works. So that helped me a lot.
Okay, awesome. And finally, what excites you the most about the future of data science in logistics and e-commerce?
There's too many problems needs to be solved. Every time I feel like I've solved a problem, there is a one more problem arising. I think that's what a different problem, of course, like not the same problem, like different areas, different problem arises, and that solving that one always thrives me. That complexity, that is like you solve one problem, okay, there's another problem waiting. Or like sometimes what happens is you solve a problem, you make another problem out of it, now you have to solve that as well. So those kind of things always drives me. There's too many problems to solve, so nothing to be worried about. Like, okay, people say that, right? They're afraid about it, like AI is going to change everything. No, it's going to pose a different problems, it's going to have a different problems to solve right now. So you just have to steer in that direction. You are solving one problem yesterday, now you're going, in the future you're going to solve a different problem. That's about it. There's always too many problems. The ocean is big.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So thanks so much, Gautam, for your time and for your insights. And thank you everyone for tuning in. See you next time. Cheers.